Lovely to be here with you, this class. And I said my name's Suryagupta, and this evening we're going to be talking about a teacher, a guru, one of Sangharakshita's teachers. So Sangharakshita was a founder of Triratna, the movement that the London Buddhist Centre is part of. And we're speaking about one of his teachers and a very sort of popular motto that this teacher had. And we'll get a picture for the second half. But this is this teacher. His name was Dharma Rinpoche. Dharma Rinpoche. And we started this series last week. And it says this: cherish the doctrine, live united, radiate love. Cherish the doctrine, live united, radiate love. And that's, in a way, he was summing up his whole approach to Buddhism. In a way, if you couldn't remember lots of Buddhist texts and teachings, you could just remember this motto, and it would capture the kind of essence of the Dharma, capture the essence of Buddhism in a very practical way. So I'm going to be exploring, so last week Sangharakshita explored the first part, which is cherish the doctrine. And tonight I'm going to be speaking about the second part of it, which is live united. Live united. But firstly, who was he? So you can catch up on the talk that Sangharakshita gave last week, because he gave a bit of biographical detail. But for me, the key thing about him, he was one of Sangharakshita's teachers, and Sangharakshita had a number of different teachers, and he was very fortunate. I mean, he was born in Tooting, Sangharakshita, Tooting Broadway, around 19 something. What's he born? 23, 25, not 25, yes, thank you. He went to India after the war, towards the end of the war. He went to India, part of the kind of war efforts, and he was very fortunate because the war was ending around that time, and he was already a Buddhist. He became a Buddhist when he was 16. He's read a really ancient text and understood this text at 16 years old, and knew he was a Buddhist, knew he'd always been a Buddhist, and knew he was going to be a Buddhist for the rest of his life. And he was sort of learning what he could in London, but then went to India as part of the efforts, and stayed in India, basically, stayed there after the war ended. And he did this incredible thing, because he wanted to follow in the footsteps of the Buddha. And what he knew was that the Buddha, the historical Buddha who lived 2,600 years ago, had left his home and went wandering, gave up all his sort of princely clothes and garbs, it gave up his title, his status, and he went wandering in search of the truth. And Sangharakshita wanted to follow in his footsteps. So when he got to India, he thought, this is the land where the Buddha was born, and he got some robes, and walked barefoot feet, carried a bowl, because that's what the Buddha did. He carried a bowl and people would give food, and he burnt his passport and really gave up, his identity as a kind of English man from Tooting, and became a Buddhist. It was pretty radical. Like, you just wouldn't advise anyone to do that these days in that way. But he was really in search of a living tradition, because it wasn't, obviously, the UK doesn't have a living tradition, and he was in search of practitioners who could actually teach him how to fully embody what it was to be a Buddhist. And because, of course, books can only take you so far. He had read books, he'd managed to access the Dharma in that way, and it was very much around, how do I live this? How do I become like the Buddha? That was his great aspiration. And he sort of manages to find various teachers in India, not all of them Buddhist. He's really searching for anyone really that sort of has a sense of spiritual vitality, that where he really sees that they are in touch with the truth. He's really looking for that, and along the way he does meet a Buddhist scholar, teacher, and they go eventually travelling up to North India, to Kalimpong, which is where the sort of Himalayas are, near Darjeeling, and you've all heard of the tea. So up there in those regions. And there, his teacher says to him, after their trip, the teacher says to him, stay here and work for the good of Buddhism. And the teacher leaves. And he's there in Kalimpong, in this town, figuring out what does that mean, how to work for the good of Buddhism. So I had the great fortune this year in January to go to Kalimpong myself, go to India for the first time. And we went straight to Kalimpong. And I was really surprised, actually, that it's quite a small, there's like 2 long main roads, and that's where sort of everything happens. And it's spread out, there's various different villages and districts around, but there's mainly 2 long roads. And what happened when Sangharakshita was there was that China had invaded Tibet, and many of Tibetan people were basically fleeing for their lives, including many of the monastics, many of the teachers, many of the gurus that had been there. And Tibet had been a place where Buddhism had really flourished for centuries. And it really was very vital, very alive, but very sort of enclosed. In a way, Tibetan Buddhism wasn't really very, very well known before this invasion, because they were like happily practicing, happily engaged in their traditions. And there were a few different Buddhist traditions that evolved, and Buddhism was thriving in Tibet. Whereas in India, it had died out effectively. Many other traditions were there, but Buddhism as a living tradition that was passed on from teacher to student had effectively died out. And it was fortunate if you found somebody who was sort of sincere in their practice. And Sangharakshita had found this one teacher who was able to help him. But there wasn't any sort of institutions that he felt that he could really be fully part of there and thrive. But he goes up to Kalimpong at the time where many of the Tibetans are leaving. And he finds himself there with many of the masters of the 20th and 21st century, who are sort of, some of them stay in Kalimpong, but others are en route to other parts of India. And when I was in Kalimpong, when I saw how small it was, in a way, the sort of these 2 main streets, I was thinking, my goodness, imagine like an English guy in robes with shaved head, with all these Tibetans, coming in, and all these famous teachers suddenly meeting in the high street. It's like meeting in Roman Road. Suddenly the kind of the great and the good all descend on Roman Road or Bethnal Green Road, and suddenly you're there thinking, wow, it's all here. So Dada Rinpoche was one of these teachers. He had actually already left Tibet before the invasion, fortunately, but he was living in Kalimpong, and he basically spotted Sangharakshita, this shaven-haired English man, because that just wasn't not a common sight in those days, and wondered, what's an English Buddhist, an English monk? That in itself was a kind of an unusual concept. And they found themselves in connection, found themselves in communication, and Sangharakshita became his pupil. And Dada Rinpoche began to teach him. And there's a lovely short film, where Dada Rinpoche's talking about meeting Sangharakshita, and he's just saying how he really, really enjoyed teaching him, because Sangharakshita clearly was very open very able to just take in all the teachings. So Dada Rinpoche would share a teaching, and somehow Sangharakshita sort of understood it, got it, was able to understand its implications, and then that sort of inspired Dada Rinpoche to teach him more. So it was a lovely sort of a connection they had. And in the end, they really developed a very strong friendship, which in those days, a pupil didn't always develop a personal friendship with the teacher, and they did. So what we've got here is a lineage, what we call lineage. And lineage, in a way, there's been a lineage from the time of the Buddha. When the Buddha discovered the path to freedom, he taught, his friends, the people that he'd already previously been practicing with. They went off and taught others, who then discovered the truth for themselves. And then they went off and taught others very naturally, very organically. It wasn't preaching, it wasn't like a megaphone preaching and saying, come over here. It was just through their lived example, their lived experience. It's as if you meet somebody and you think, oh, there's something about that person. I feel I can really be open with them. I can really share with them. And then, you share what's going on with you, and next thing they're giving you some advice. You think, oh God, that's really helpful. They're sharing some words of what Sangha Dara spoke last week about, words of power. That's what the Dharma is. The Dharma is words of power. That if you're open to them, and they're the right words that come to you at that time, can really transform your life, can change the way you perceive your experience, the way you see yourself and the way you see others. And that's a living tradition. And it has to come through people that have discovered that truth for themselves, or at least partly discovered that truth for themselves, on the way to discovering that truth for themselves. That's lineage. So you have, from the time of the Buddha, all the way to Dada Rinpoche, there's an unbroken line of practitioners who sort of committed to waking up, committed to discovering the truth, and then willingly sharing that with those who want to receive that as well. So Sangharakshita, really met Dada Rinpoche, and then I encountered Dada Rinpoche because I'd been on a meditation weekend retreat. We always sort of, if you really want to get a sense of what's possible in meditation, we really encourage you to go on retreat, because there you got the best conditions. You got quiet, you ain't got your phone, all distractions. There's no major housework to do. You're just focused on your meditation. You're focused on in a beautiful space with other people who are like-minded. So I came along to a Buddhist center, not this one. It was in a house. I knocked at the door at the Buddhist center. Didn't know who I was going to meet when they opened the door. And I thought, okay, they were friendly enough. And they guided me into a room where I sat to meditate for the first time ever. And I was like, oh, this is hard, It wasn't easy to follow my breath. It wasn't easy to count to 10. I didn't understand it really. Didn't understand how it worked. But on the way out, I bought a couple of books and really read some words of power. I read the book. I bought two books. Book one, which was about healing, and it was very much around healing into life and death. It was called, and it was very much how life is a opportunity for us to become whole. And how do we do that, with the teachings? And the other one was one by Sangharakshita, called, it's now called The Noble Eightfold Path, but then it was called Vision and Transformation. And I'd had some really strong experiences prior to coming to the Buddhist Center, which meant that I had some big questions to ask. And one of them was, how do I love? How do I love in a way that, how do I live? How do I live so that when I die, I can die without regret? And how do I love? I could see there was a gap between my wish to live fully and to love. There was a gap between my aspiration and my actual reality, my actual experience. and I didn't know how to bridge that gap. And I picked up the book, and it just spoke to me. And I thought, I think this is it. But is it real? Like, can you live it now? You know, like, because he talked about the Buddha's ancient path, the Noble Eightfold Path, and he talked about that you have a vision and then you transform your whole life in accordance with that vision. And I thought, I've had a vision. I know there's more. I know there's more to me, more to what's possible to life than I'm being told. But can I really live it? Is it really possible for me? So I read the book, was inspired, but didn't know. I thought, okay, I'm going to go on a retreat because then I'll at least be with other people. So I went on this weekend retreat and had this, actually I just enjoyed it. It was a simple matter of just enjoying my time there. And it was only the very last meditation where I felt my mind was calming down, and I had an insight really at that very last meditation. It had quite an effect on me. But I came back, and one of the team members said to me, "Hey, if you want to, there's an event happening in London. If you want to, see more of what we do in this movement." And I thought, okay, well, my family live in London. I can come down for the weekend, and I'll pop in to this event and see what the Buddhists are like en masse, and see what I think. Making a bit of an assessment, I guess. So I came to the building down the road called York Hall, which was famous in the day for boxing. And there was a great hall where I just walked in. I didn't really know what I was going to, but what I was going to was a celebration of Dada Rinpoche. And it was called a death anniversary. They were celebrating a year since he died. He died the year before. And there was a huge picture on the shrine where, and obviously I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anyone there apart from the guy who'd invited me. So I was just wandering around really for a while, and then listening to person after person on stage talking about this man, Dada Rinpoche. And they were all, the main thing that struck me was that they were all so impacted by their encounter with him. Some of the ex-students and people that had, because he ran a school, that's what I discovered. I thought, oh, he's a monk, he's a guru, he's a teacher, and he runs a school. That's what he does. He wakes up in the morning, 4:00 in the morning, meditates for about 6 hours, and then starts his day job, if you like, running a school for Tibetan refugees, Tibetan orphans. And then he, after school's finished, he then carries on practicing. Some of them were speaking about that he was like a mother and father to them. His level of care to the individual students would seem to be they were just deeply touched by it, deeply impacted by the fact that there was this great Lama, and he was a great Lama. He'd been sort of seen from young as a Rinpoche. Rinpoche means precious one. And he basically is sort of seen as an incarnation of a previous great master, because that's sort of how the Tibetan system really worked, how the kind of teachings and the wisdom and the compassion kept flowing through, because different people would die and then somehow there would be a next reincarnation ready to carry on the work of the previous teacher. So he was recognized as one of these great teachers, really great potential. He had great potential. That's what he says. He had great potential. And so basically he, people are speaking about him, and they really experience the impact of him. And there was one woman who spoke. I was struck by quite a few people, but one woman spoke. Her words were kind of, I thought, really just captured it somehow. And she said, Rinpoche had a very unassuming manner, yet there was a feeling of supreme confidence. Overall, though, I was struck by his kindness and generosity. He expressed this practically in the way he gave us his undivided attention for hours at a time. And then she says there were also lighter moments. They talk about he's teaching them, he's sharing teachings with them. But then she said there were also lighter moments, lighter times, such as when we showed Rinpoche photographs, gave him gifts, or sat silently eating our meals. The gifts from us and from others really delighted him. He had an innocent, childlike quality when opening them. His eyebrows would rise and he'd ooh and ah over them. And then she says, when it came to the final meal, I found myself feeling very sad and couldn't stop crying. He had a translator called Champal. Champal was not around to translate, and we were eating in silence. I had the strong sense that I had been given something very precious. I had been given so much kindness, care and attention, and felt very much at home. The thought that I might not see Rinpoche again made me very sad. And I saw Rinpoche as a precious gem. I didn't know at the time that Rinpoche meant precious one. And that in this world, beings like him are very rare. Here I was with this little old man in this very obscure place, but I had a sense that when he was no longer there, it would be a loss to the whole world, to the whole of humanity, to the whole world. So when she was speaking, this woman, I was struck by lots of the speakers, but as she was speaking, I was thinking there's something about her that I quite like. You know, sometimes you hear somebody, you think, what is it about them? And she spoke more and more. And I thought, I'm gonna get to know this woman one day. Don't know who she is, but I'm going to get to know her. And her name was Sangha Devi. And 4 years later, I met her. It took me 4 years to meet her. But she was the one in the end that sort of gave me my name, Suryagupta. And, she sort of then initiated me, if you like, into, she kind of ordained me. So this is lineage. So she was inspired by Dada Rinpoche. And I was at that day inspired by her, inspired by all the people that spoke about him. Inspired, Sangha Ratchita was leading the day, so I was kind of struck by him as well. He sort of reminded me, I thought he's a Buddhist teacher, this man. And he was very plainly spoken, like I could understand everything he was saying. And he had a quite dry sense of humour. Every now he'd say something that I thought, I think he's making a joke there. And then, but at the same time, he had this profundity to him. There was a kind of something mysterious about him, which sort of I couldn't quite put the two together. Like, I understand everything you're saying. You're very plainly spoken, and yet there's something quite mysterious about you as well. It was a bit like, the only comparison I had was my professor at uni or a GP, where you're sort of waiting for them to tell you something really sort of important. And then sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, That was the only sort of comparison I had about Sangha. I think, he's just like that. Something important is coming from him. And he shared this motto, cherish the doctrine, live united, radiate love. And he said this motto was in Dada Rinpoche's school. So he had this school, and it was written in the school. And it was very much for the children of the school, because he wanted them to really have a very straightforward way to understand Buddhism and to practice it, to live it. So I felt that day, I was struck by Sangha Ratchita, I was struck by Dada Rinpoche. This is where, for me, Dada Rinpoche, Sangha Ratchita, Sangha Devi, my preceptor who ordained me. And by the end, I stayed on for the whole day. And at the end, I knew I was a Buddhist. I knew I was a Buddhist. I knew that I was going to be a Buddhist for the rest of my life. And I knew that Dada Rinpoche was the teacher really I'd been looking for. I didn't know how that was going to pan out. I thought, here's a teacher I've been looking for, and he's no longer alive. So how is that going to sort of come into effect, as it were? But I didn't worry about that because Sangharakshita was there, and and I'd met people that I knew I wanted to learn from. And I thought they're in touch with him. They're in touch with him, so that can touch me. And it was this year that I finally went to see Dada Rinpoche's school. I met Jampal, his assistant, his head teacher and personal assistant. And I also went to his monastery as well, which was in Darjeeling. And it was a very impactful meeting. I felt like I'd been waiting a very, very long time to be in his space, as it were. And, his influence, even though I've never met him in person, something of what's come through the lineage has come to me. And he's very alive in my sort of consciousness as a sort of inspiration and as a teacher. And that's quite mysterious, how that all works. I couldn't sort of necessarily explain it to you. But in a way, we probably all have a sense of that, because we wouldn't be here without the Buddha. We wouldn't be here without this person who started the whole, discovered the teachings, discovered the way 2,600 years ago. Something of the Buddha's influence is still coming through in the world. And when we see images of the Buddha, when we see, images of the Buddha, there's something of that speaks to us. Even whether the first time I came here, I was like, God, that's big. It was actually we have a much bigger one now at the retreat centre, but that felt really large to me. And I just wasn't sure how to relate to it, because I was like, I grew up Christian and you didn't have sort of things like this, altars and figures and things. And yet when I closed my eyes in meditation, I had a sense of the Buddha that spoke to me. So the Buddha isn't a historical, just a historical being. The Buddha is, what is, is our own potential for awakening, for freedom, for deep calm and peace and love and compassion. And this has been carried down through the ages, from practitioner to practitioner, who've studied the teachings, practiced the meditations, and realised the truth for themselves. And then come to people like me, like you, and give us the sort of opportunity to discover it for ourselves. And Dada Rinpoche spoke this motto: cherish the doctrine, live united, radiate love. And what we're going to do this evening is just to explore, what is it to live united? What does that actually mean? How do we actually do it? Why do it? Even why? Why is it necessary? Why is it helpful? Why is that a core aspect of his teaching, to live united? What's the benefits for us? And what's the process of arriving at that? We're going to be unpacking that together. So I was sharing before about Dada Rinpoche, my encounter with him. And one of the things that I heard on that day when I met him, as it were, for the first time, was the word bodhisattva. So he was spoken, Bhante Sangharakshita spoke about him as a living bodhisattva. So we know about the Buddha, the historical Buddha. We know that he became enlightened. We know there's been a lineage that's gone from him to the current day of practitioners, people realizing the truth to whatever extent they do. And a bodhisattva is someone who is very advanced in their spiritual development. And it's said that they are set on enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So they're sort of coursing in the very sort of higher echelons, as it were, of consciousness, development of consciousness, and they're doing that for their benefit, to alleviate their own suffering, and for all beings. So they have this real deep compassion for others, and they're practicing for others, with others in mind. So Dharma Rinpoche was called by Sangharakshita a living bodhisattva, somebody who really was very deeply in touch with the truth, and was practicing for others. And his immediate sort of way of doing that was by working with the children in the school, by really helping them. And it wasn't an ordinary school, it was a school where they were passing on Tibetan culture, as well as teachings, as well as normal sort of curriculum. Yeah. And I say that because, our topic this evening, we're looking at one aspect of his motto, live united. So bodhisattva would really, is working for the benefit of all beings, because it cares for all beings, because he sees all beings as precious, as it were, as significant, and wants the very best for all beings. That is the sort of bodhisattva's sort of mindset. For me, I sort of grew up, as I said, I grew up Christian, and for me, I sort of definitely had been inspired by people who were compassionate. I was inspired by kindness. I was inspired by when I heard people saying they wanted to help alleviate suffering, or they wanted to help all beings. Although for me, one of my heroes growing up was Martin Luther King, and he certainly created a real. He helped millions of people believe in the possibility of love, and the possibility of love for people that are very different to yourself, to oneself. And and he also, I was very conscious that whilst I was inspired by his teaching, I was conscious that he also, had an untimely, violent death. So for me, that was always like, is it if you really are, helping others, if you're really putting yourself out there for others, does that mean suffering? Does that mean it's going to be really hard work? Does that mean that you're going to have a challenging, difficult life, as it were? That was always something that I sort of struggled with, really. I thought, well, I just want to be happy. Is it all right to just want one personal happiness? Because that's what I want. And I also want to make a difference. I also want my presence on this earth to be of benefit on some way. I want to make a positive difference, but I also want happiness. So that was always the kind of like dilemma when I sort of saw people that had really worked for others, really had that sense of compassion. But when I heard about Dharma Rinpoche, it was very interesting because, he seemed, from when you heard about his life, he was somebody who was very fulfilled, as it were. He sort of was very engaged in his own personal practice. He meditated for hours, we heard, each morning. And then he seemed to really have a lot of joy and enjoyment with working with the children. And he obviously had students, Buddhist students as well, that he taught. He seemed like he had a wellspring of enjoyment and a wellspring of joy and a wellspring of energy that he was drawing on from. So somehow it was like he could be compassionate and give, but not get exhausted by that, not get overwhelmed by that. It was coming from a wellspring of energy, joy, and understanding. And so for me, that was really intriguing. I hadn't really encountered that before. And that's apparently very much a bodhisattva's way of being as well. It's almost like helping others is like helping others. You feel there's great compassion, but there's also play, and there's also joy, and there's also ease. It's not coming from tension. It's coming from a depth of ease and relaxation, in a sense. So I find that quite fascinating, that combination. So living united, what does that mean? So we're sort of coming to live united. In a way, we're coming together for a common purpose. That's really what live united means. It means you're coming together with a common purpose or common values, common aim. That's one meaning of it. And as for Buddhists, what that really means is actually not just coming together. You're coming around a common purpose and working out how to live that purpose. It's not just like if you're a Buddhist and you're really committed as a Buddhist, you're kind of going, okay, I'm interested in the ideals, but I'm interested in the ideals, learning the ideals, bringing them into practice in my life, but then also how to live it. So it's not just something you read and think, oh, that was very nice, and you put down. It's something you actually want to bring into effect. And the purpose that we're coming around is the three jewels. It's the ideal, the possibility that awakening exists as a possibility for us, that we can be free. We can be free of hatred, we can be free of greed, we can be free of ignorance. We can be free of all that constricts us, all that causes us, all our daily and life suffering. And it's not that you're not going to have painful experiences necessarily in life. It's more that how we respond to it, how we respond to our experience either helps us open up and connect with ourselves and others and have more awareness, or how we respond to it can deepen the suffering. So this is the suffering we're talking about, a reactive suffering, if you like. The suffering that we have this teaching of the two arrows, where you have the painful thing that happens. I don't know, you get you sort of miss the train or something that happens that you really wanted to happen, and you can have a response to that. You either respond in a way that increases that sort of pain, that initial pain, or you have a response to it that actually frees you from that, expands your horizon, expands your sense of who you are. So basically the kind of what we're living united around a common goal as a Buddhist is this common goal of freedom, awakening into our real potential, and freeing ourselves from suffering. And it's around the goal of actually practicing that so that it comes a reality. And you use the teachings, you use the different practices we have, the methods, to see that in your own experience. Again, it's one thing to go, well, that's a wonderful goal. I'd love that. I'd love to be free of all suffering, and I'd love to be compassionate to all beings. But the how does that happen? How do you take yourself from where you are to this aspiration of where you want to be? There's a practice involved, and there's a teachings and reflections that are really key for that. And then there's a sangha, so the spiritual community. In a way, the whole of Buddhism has come through relationships, comes through this transmission from, teacher to disciple, from that disciple when they realise their experience, passing it on. It comes through this lived experience and people gathering together to learn from each other. It's what we do here at the London Buddhist Centre. We're sort of gathering together to learn from each other. And learning from each other means encouraging each other. I'm often, when I hear people's stories of why they come to the centre and what their experiences are when they come and they're on their experiences on retreat, I'm often really moved and touched, and I learn something. I learn about what it is to be human. I learn what it is to be human when you're trying to grow, when you're trying to wake up. I learn the challenges of that, because everybody has their own particular challenge. There's some core challenges we all have, but it manifests for each of us slightly differently. And then I see what potential looks like. I see people making effort, and I see the effort come to fruition, and I see what that looks like. And it's, again, deeply inspiring. I'm often deeply moved and deeply inspired by people's efforts to grow. And I share my own, of course. And, together, it creates a culture where you can come here and share what's going on for you, and it can be really met. You can meet people who share values, who actually recognise that life isn't easy. And life as it's normally lived isn't easy. There's always these ups and downs. And how do you navigate that in a way that actually increases your well-being, increases your awareness, increasing your connection, rather than close you down? And so coming here, like, we need other people to show us. You can't really do this path, completely by yourself. So that's a spiritual community. And that's the first meaning of this living united. You live united in a way that where you basically recognize the importance of community. The importance of community to show you what's possible. The importance of community to show you to encourage you when you need encouragement, for inspiration. You recognize that you're not on this journey of life by yourself. And you're not on this journey of life, you don't have to be on this journey of life where you're trying to just make effort by yourself. You can gain so much from others. And the other part of living united is a recognition that, and this goes to much more the heart of Buddhist teachings, the recognition that we aren't separate from each other. There's this core delusion, Buddhism says, that says that we think we are separate. We think I'm over here, you're over there, and I'm just doing my life and you're just doing yours. That's just how things are. Buddhism said that's not really how it is. We're not separate beings. We think we are, but we're really not. And I remember when I first heard that, I had to really sort of, I thought, I'm not going to quite understand this rationally. You can sort of unpack it rationally, but for me, I thought, this is not just a rational concept. This is an actual experience again. And you can draw out the rational concepts from that, but this is actual experience that we're not actually separate. What Buddhism says is that we're interdependent, we're interwoven with each other. And actually, if you look at your life, if you look at just how you are now, but certainly if you look back at your life, like, how did you come to be how you are? It's made up of so many different factors, so many different conditions, from parents to schooling to your ancestors. I mean, you could go back. You could your environment, from the food that you eat, from the kind of the habits that you have. It's all made up of so many different factors, and they're all made up of so many different factors. I remember on a little radio show, I was talking about interconnectedness, the fact that we're connected with each other, and she said, the radio host said, "Oh, could you just explain that again? Like, how?" And I said, well, we're dependent on each other. Like, I couldn't, the clothes that I wear, the food that I eat, what literally makes me up, as it were, including the parents that gave birth to me, the mum that gave birth to me, and I'm dependent on all those factors to become who I am. And she was like, she didn't sort of get it. And afterwards I thought, I actually had an image in my mind, and the image was of a tapestry, a woven tapestry. And if you have a tapestry, it's made up of all these woven bits of thread. And if you pulled some of the bits of thread out, it would change the whole picture. So what makes up that tapestry is all those elements coming together. And what makes up those different colours? And what makes up the thread? What makes up the whole structure of it is so many different factors coming together. And you take some out and it changes it. That's us as well as beings. Martin Luther King said, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men, he says, are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is an interrelated structure of reality. So we are sort of made up of all these different conditions, and we're impacted by all different conditions. You can see that in the world today. If you go on the news and you see all the various things that are happening, it's like you're walking down the street. You can be walking down the street and something just can happen. It's got nothing to do with you, as it were. You know, you didn't cause it. It just happens. I was just thinking about the plane crashes and the various different wars and conflicts that are going on. You're caught up with all these conditions around you, and it deeply impacts on you. But it also happens positively as well. You know, have so many positive things that happen in our lives that we benefit from, that we didn't necessarily, you know, decide on. It just it happens, you know, through others' effects. So we're woven together, caught together. But I was thinking, and this is all connected to living united, this idea that we're really deeply interconnected. If we really understood that and really lived that, what would be the kind of consequences of that? How would it change us if we really saw our interconnectedness, our interdependence? What would you do differently? How would you respond? I'm very curious with us, exploring that. What difference would it make for us if we really understood our interconnectedness? And I'm also interested in what are the kind of benefits, disadvantages of us seeing ourselves as separate. Now, we see ourselves as separate most of the time. What's the issue with that? What's the issue with this sense of separateness? How does it cause challenges for us? And what would life be like? How would it be different? How would your experience be different if you really experience interconnectedness? Let's just get into little short groups and explore that. Groups of 3. So let's start with the question around what's the issue around keeping us, the idea of us being separate. What are the challenges with that? What challenges does it create for us, this idea of this sense of ourselves as being separate? Yeah, Nadia.
We were just talking, and I was just thinking about the things that are happening around the world. And sometimes you feel like, oh, don't I look at that because it's like really overwhelming. But I was thinking on a sort of more like bigger picture level, if we all have that reaction, I think most of us at some point will find ourselves in a situation where we do need help from others, where we will try and take responsibility for ourselves, but we need to ask for help. But if people are turning away because they're too overwhelmed, they don't want to see it, or the topic is too taboo, it sounds a bit dramatic, but that's how societies break down. The fabric of society breaks down when you're not willing to be connected to each other.
Yeah, great. So when you see yourself as separate, you're not identifying with another. You're not identifying with another's. In that case, you're talking about another's suffering. And it's like you want to keep it at bay because you don't want to be too impacted by it, And we've all probably had that experience. But what you're saying, Nadia, is that sometimes you are that person that's suffering. And actually that connection that you have from another often makes a significant positive difference, because you're not alone. When somebody reaches out to you in a way that feels really connected and sincere, you suddenly can make a significant difference to the suffering you're going through. I've had that time and time again. Someone just saying, "How are you doing?" And I'll be like, "Oh, thank you for asking," and then I'll share, and suddenly it's whatever I'm carrying is lighter. We can make a really positive difference to each other by being willing to connect when they're with others, and recognise that what somebody's going through is a set of conditions, It's a set of conditions that, you know, we might not go through that set of conditions, but we've gone through other set of conditions. Yeah. Great. What other issues is it?
We can be really self-centered,
Mm-hmm.
and in conflicts want things to be right or think you're right, and want things to always be fair.
Yeah, yeah. Ah.
And things aren't always fair.
Right. Yeah, interesting. So the self-centeredness of things, yes. And that goes quite deep for us as human beings. It's very much like, you know, you see the world, it's like you are the center. That's what that means. You are the center. Yourself is the center of everything. So you see the world just from your point of view. And that's on one level, you know, it's okay, isn't it? On one level, that's kind of how else can we see the world in a sense. But, you know, then you get the analogy of the elephants with the three blindfolded people, and they're all touching a bit of the elephant. One is touching the elephant's tusks, another's touching the elephant's ears, and the other touching the elephant's tail. And they're having they've got the question, what is this elephant? And they're like, oh, it's long and thin, and, you know, it's got this little thing at the end, you know. And the other one saying, well, it's a spike. It's really smooth and cool, and it's got a spike at the end. And others say, no, it's got this big flat, you know, this big sort of hide. So they're all describing different parts of this elephant and thinking that their experience is the truth. That is the issue. It's not that it's wrong. It's that there's other perspectives, there's other realities. It's not the only, you know, they can't grasp the whole of that elephant. And that's the same with us. It's like we have our perspective, we see things from our point of view, and then what we often want, the self-centeredness aspect, is like, okay, this is how I see the world, this is what the world says to me, and I now want this as a result. I now need this. And then it becomes very, you know, you can't see others, you can't step into others' shoes. You can't see there might be other needs going on at the same time. Is that what you were talking about? Yeah. So, and actually if 8+ billion people all trying to meet their needs and seeing things from their point of view, then you can see why we have challenges daily. Let's have one more thing that causes, that's a challenge with seeing ourselves as separate. Yes.
We were talking about loneliness. Like you end up,
Say again?
you end up being a bit lonely.
Ah, yeah.
Despite being sort of in touch or in contact with people.
Yeah.
Like you can still sort of feel separate or feel that sort of sense of, I don't know, existential loneliness or something.
Yeah, isn't that, I find that, you know, that sense of you can be in a crowd and feel completely alone. And I find that fascinating because, like, what is it that we're looking for in that moment when we're in that place? What is it that's missing in that moment? And I think it is this sense of, you know, I'm not actually fundamentally alone. There's a deep interconnectedness, but somehow we're in a such situation or context, or we're just in ourselves unable to see it that way. We're unable to experience it. We're unable to receive what is already around us. Because there will be people that can connect with us and we can share ourselves, but sometimes when we're in that, it's like a gulf, isn't it? So the more you practice this sense of, you know, I'm connected. I'm connected with myself and connect with others. The more that sort of existential loneliness, as it were, can really, you understand it. Firstly, you can understand, actually, maybe I haven't. Certainly for me, when if I ever have those sort of moments that come, I just think, okay, am I connected with myself sufficiently today? Do I need to actually engage more with myself? And then have I connected with another, you know, meaningfully, that shares something important? Do I need to share more of myself? Do I need to hear more from others? Yeah. Do I need to really connect with another in some way? And then it's amazing when you do, it sort of kind of evaporates. Lovely. And so what's the benefits then of us? How would we act? How would life change for us if we really see life, see our interdependentness, our interconnectedness? How would life change for us? What do we do differently? How would we be?
We have less things.
Less things?
Yeah.
Why less things?
I think, we talked about how this, particularly in our culture here, it's a lot about get more, have more, and more will make us happy. Infinite growth,
Right.
particularly in certain like work spheres.
Yeah.
More.
How does that relate to the interconnectedness,
So
though,
then seeing that you're more
interdependence?
connected, you want less.
Okay, all right.
And
You just feel more fulfilled, more
give,
satisfied.
and you give more.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. You certainly, I think, would give more in a sense. But let's hear from others as well, see if how that we can give more, yeah.
You display more empathy.
Yeah. Just, you actually would just really recognise that even if the experience, the details of the experience is different, there's an underlying fundamental human emotions that you can relate to, that you've had as well in some way or other, and you can share from that. Yeah.
I think you may choose our words more carefully and our actions might be more considered.
Yes.
If we realise that we were interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the major things is ethics. You'd actually consider the consequences of your actions. What are the consequences for me? And what are the consequences for other? And in our tradition, when you're ordained, you sort of take on 4 speech precepts, 4 things to kind of look at with your speech. Because speech is a really big way that we impact on each other. So we look at our speech, we consider is our speech kind? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it harmonious? And the other side of that, is it harsh? Is it untruthful? Is it kind of unhelpful? And is it leading to disharmony? Just with our speech. So when you're really aware that actually what I do has an effect, then and actually that effect is not just on other, it's on me too. If you've ever had that, if you've said something, you think, oh, we shouldn't have. As soon as it comes out, you might think, oh God, why did I say that? You already feel the kind of ouch. And then you sort of wait for the response. It's really important that we sort of practice ethics with compassion, with loving kindness, because we are not, awakened beings. I'm speaking for all of you here, but maybe there is, but I'm just assuming we're not awakened beings, we're not enlightened. Therefore, we're going to act in ways, what we're doing, we're practicing. We're learning how to live. We're learning how to live in a way that's beneficial for ourselves and others. And for that, ethics is key, because it's a recognition that what I do has an effect on myself and others. And you don't always see how far that effect can go. Sometimes you think it doesn't have an effect because you can't see it in the moment. And then much later on down the line, you realise, that was that thought, that was that action that I did. So I think that's a fundamental thing. Our ethical sensitivity would be really heightened in a really grounded way. And we'd be thinking, how else can I act here? Yeah? Brilliant. So we do the Metta Bhavana practice. We had a short Metta Bhavana practice earlier. And the Metta Bhavana practice is a practice which was the Buddha devised to help us with fear. Because another consequence of feeling separate and not realising that we are so interconnected is that we can get into feeling of fear. Because we're trying to shore up, we're trying to defend this being. We're trying to go, well, I'm over here, I've got to get all that I need, I've got to look after myself, I've got to do all these things in order to be okay. So we've put a lot of effort into that. And And he sort of taught this practice, and it started with these monks in the forest. And the monks were meditating in the forest and getting a bit spooked out because there were these spirits in the forest that were firstly okay with the monks being there, and eventually decided the monks were overstaying their welcome. And they started creating all these sounds and, smells and various things to kind of, scare the monks away. And the monks all went running off, and the Buddha said, no, go back into the forest. And he gave them this metta bhavana practice to do. So the monks were meditating, and they were basically bringing themselves to mind, wishing themselves well, bringing, friends, bringing a neutral person, someone they have some difficulty with, all beings, and included all beings, which was literally all the beings that were dwelling in the forest as well. And it was in that experience that, of course, the spirits themselves were feeling, I imagine, more and more connected to them because they were being wished well. They were having positive feelings, positive expressions, positive intentions coming their way. And you sort of know that, don't you? If somebody's wishing you well, if somebody has a positive way of sort of engaging with you, you can sense it. You can go into, I remember a while back I was having to go to lots of different hospitals with my son because, to figure out what condition he had, and because he'd had a car accident, and we were trying to work out what had happened with him, and he's fine now, luckily. But we were having to go to all these different kind of people, and some would go, oh, hello, how are you? Sit down. And they just like really ask you questions and engage. They didn't know us, but they were just kind of really interested in getting to the bottom of it. And others, one or two, would be like, well, yes, and just not connect. And the difference that it had in not just how we felt, but also what came out of each interaction was quite marked. And it was simply connection, simply metta, simply awareness, taking another in. So when we wish others well, we might not always think it's having, when we do our metta bhavana practice, we might think it's not having a necessary effect, particularly if we're struggling in the metta. But it's having an effect on us because we're becoming more aware of what's going on with us. And over time, it absolutely has an effect with others as well. I've certainly seen that, particularly you see it more really markedly with the person in the person you have some difficulty with in that stage. Put that person in again and again, and the neutral stage. And next thing you know, actually that person doesn't feel neutral anymore. I don't know them that well still, but I feel connected to them. I feel like I'm in relationship with them. Yeah. So this is what we can do to live united just on a daily basis. Just going about our lives, bringing people to mind, wishing them well. It makes a difference in how we interact with them and how we experience ourselves and whatever goes on in our lives. But the other reason Dada Rinpoche spoke about living united was very much around, us as a community, a spiritual community that comes together around this an ideal to grow, to support each other's growth. And he was very he was very intentional in that. He was very concerned, the way he was with his students in his school, he's very concerned with really what do they need? What do they need to help them grow? He was really concerned with getting to know them so that he could respond, appropriately. And that's really what we do in spiritual community, in spiritual friendship. There's a real emphasis on spiritual friendship in our community, and it really springs a lot from the friendship that Sangharakshita had with Dada Rinpoche, because he could see not only was he receiving the teachings, he was imbibing the qualities of Dada Rinpoche, and together they were growing, they were kind of benefiting from each other's, their connection. Because Sangharakshita had qualities which Dada Rinpoche was appreciating as well. And through that sort of, not just learning from each other, but being together and seeing each other grow, there was seeing each other in their daily lives, they were becoming much more aware of qualities and seeing qualities in action in the world. And that was then causing them to be more and more inspired. Certainly Sangharakshita was very inspired by Dada Rinpoche, and Dada Rinpoche really appreciated Sangharakshita as well. In fact, he suggested that Sangharakshita come back to the UK to start a new Buddhist movement. And he said, your disciples, your pupils, will be my pupils. He won't see any real difference between Sangharakshita's pupils and his pupils, which was why many order members and many people went to visit Dada Rinpoche and then had their own experience of him. So this sense that we're together in a community and we can encourage, learn from, be inspired by each other, but also witness each other's growth. You know, seeing people come along over time and years and seeing the growth. It's like you really get a sense of the potential of being human and the worthiness of engaging in spiritual practice, because you see people's lives change. You see your own life change, you see others' lives change. Sometimes you can't always see the kind of changes you're making on a week to week, month to month basis. You're sort of in there just dealing with whatever you're dealing with and working with whatever you're working with. It's over time that you see the changes in somebody, and then you think, wow, practice really does work. It really has an effect. You see people become lighter, happier, more confident, more generous, living, able to not accumulate just for the sake of it, more satisfied, more fulfilled. When I was in New Zealand last year, and there was a huge stupa, one of these, with Dada Rinpoche's ashes in them. And I just spent time just walking around, and it was in the middle of the kind of bush, as it were, beautiful, beautiful landscape. And then one night I had a dream of Dada Rinpoche. And I woke up and he was talking to me in the dream, and I woke up and most of the words that he was said came. I remembered them, and then as I sat in meditation, the other words came. So this is what came. He said, if the Sangha, the spiritual community, continues to learn to care for and have compassion for each other, then the heart wish to awaken for all beings will be more easily realised. Through learning about and caring for the Sangha, the ability to respond to the needs of many different beings are gradually developed. This is my heart wish, for the Sangha to live united and radiate love to all, and in so doing, cultivate the qualities of awakening. It is through coming together, learning about ourselves, learning about each other, that we understand what it is to be human. We understand what are the conditions that support growth. We understand the nature of suffering through our own experience and others' experience. And we understand what people need when they're in those states of suffering. And it's through that, and that actually caring for each other, that we can then extend that more broadly to the rest of the world. You have to have actual people to be on the journey with. Otherwise it becomes abstract. It becomes a kind of wish, as it were, that you don't see it coming to fruition. You don't see the actual difference it makes. So it's what he did with his students. He learned about his students. He cared for his students, those in the school and those who he was teaching Dharma to. He cared for them, he learnt about them, he understood their needs, he understood which teachings sort of met them, as it were. And it was through that, he saw them grow. He was able to respond to them. And through that, when we're doing that, we're benefiting too. If you're helping another, you benefit. And that's the kind of, because you're understanding what it really is to help another. And through that, you're understanding more your own self, your own mind, the nature of experience as well. And we'll end with Thangaratcha's quotes here and why he's a Buddhist. So we can sit in meditation for this. And this is a reading I sort of like to say every now and again because it's just reminds me too of why I'm a Buddhist. I believe that humanity is basically one. I believe that it is possible for any human being to communicate with any other human being, to feel for any other human being, to be friends with any other human being. This is what I truly and deeply believe. This belief is part of my own experience. It is part of my own life. It is part of me. I cannot live without this belief, and I would rather die than give it up. To me, to live means to practice this belief. Therefore, this belief is part of my religion. It has nothing to do with the way in which I dress, nothing to do with what I call myself. It is a matter of the way I am, the way I exist. It is the way I naturally function in the world. This is what religion really is. It is what you most truly and deeply believe. It is what you are prepared to die for. It is your life. It is what makes you what you are. It is what makes you behave in the way that you do. Religion is therefore a very important thing. In fact, it is the most important thing. So we can continue with the motto, reflecting on the motto. Cherish the doctrine. Live united. Next week we'll explore radiate love.